Hey everybody, how you doing? We got our podcast coming through, Nate Dog Trainer. We got an exciting guest on today. Her name is Allecia Maine. She goes by the Animal Healer. I discovered her online while I was chatting on some Facebook dog training groups. And every once in a while, people say things that aren't your standard answers that I'm like, hey, what do they mean by that? Or that's not what I usually hear from dog trainers. And Allecia, congratulations. You said a bunch of things that really resonated with me. I mean, everything I've listened to you since then, really, I feel we have that kind of connection. I think you probably get that a lot, both with animals and humans. And that's a big part of it, is the connecting with them. So me as a dog trainer, I've always tried to connect with dogs, either that are rescues that are currently with fosters that are having trouble connecting, or even with owners. A lot of times dogs are with owners for quite a while and they live together and they interact and they provide for them, but they really don't have that deeper connection that I know you felt and I feel and I try to bring together. And me as a trainer, a lot of what I do is hands-on, literally with the dog and putting my hands on it, because I can feel, the tension. The word used is their alignment. I mean, I can kind of feel that. You can definitely tell when the dog is out of alignment, and then that instant it comes back to alignment, they tend to relax. I was listening to kind of your pod, or not your podcast, some of your YouTube videos where you talk about, how you came to be where you are, and you were talking about like pushing on the dog and feeling them relax and the muscles and the tension. So that's great. I was right along with you for all that. Then that last little piece that you do, and this is kind of your specialty, is being able to do all that, not actually being with the dog in the same room or even the same, I think you said state, city, or even country. So
Yeah.
I've definitely felt little bits and pieces of that. I've had dogs be in the next room or not actually touching them and having them to respond to what I'm doing. I've actually found a lot of dogs a lighter touch or almost not touching them, but having them aware that you are there. And you can get into all the energy and the quantum mechanics and quantum entanglement and all that. And that, has got a very solid science base the more we look into it. So the fact that what you're doing ties into what I was doing, ties into what other people are doing. And, I used to get a lot of new age hoobie jubu, and it gets lumped with all that, which, people tend to discount it because it doesn't have the science background and it's all just, wishful thinking, and you're projecting it or you're reading into it or you're self-fulfilling prophecies. You're only seeing what you want to see. But I've watched your videos like in real time where you are sitting and the dog is there and you are saying what you're doing. The dog is responding and the dog is changing literally minute by minute from one section to the next. So that was kind of a long lead in. So why don't you tell me about yourself, other than what I covered, where you came from, how you got to where you are, and, kind of where we're going with things here.
Sure. So, my background with animals kind of started when let me say this. I'm a master animal communicator. I'm an expert body alignment specialist, and I do work remotely at distances. I am a holistic dog trainer. I'm the inventor of Walk and Sync, which is a harness and leash system that really helps dogs to stop pulling, but protects their bodies. I'm an author, I'm a TV host. So I've got a pretty long, extensive background. I was a fitness trainer before I started working with animals. So I'm very familiar with human biomechanics, breathing, body alignment, and that sort of shifted over to the animals. The animals led me on a path. I had been studying Qigong, which is an ancient Chinese self-healing martial art, as opposed to a fighting martial art. And I was offered an opportunity to go to a workshop on the Big Island of Hawaii in 1997, and it was for animal communication. And I went and I connected with the dolphins, and literally I had an experience with a dolphin hanging right in front. And this was the open ocean. This was not like we were at a facility, they were feeding the animals fish.
Right.
These were dolphins that came into the bay and were swimming around, and while I could hear them in the distance, I was fascinated with something in the water. And the next thing I knew, I looked up and there is a dolphin literally hanging right in front of me. And I was like, oh, like had to keep my mouth around the snorkel, but I was like, what? I did not
Right.
expect that. So the interaction that happened not only was telepathic, but she started giggling and I was like, what are you doing? And she's like, what do you mean, what am I doing? I'm like, I don't know, but I feel golden energy
Right.
coming right into my stomach. And I'm like, my whole mind is getting blown and I don't know, I mean, I had practiced Qigong, I was connected with everything, but I didn't know dolphins could do this. I didn't, I was just like, let's see if I can communicate with them. So that happened, and basically it was a culmination of a dream since I had that I was when I was 5 years old, and my mother said, what do you want to do with your life? And I said, I want to be a vet and I want to heal. I want to help sick animals heal. So that's how the path led me was so strange because I was horrible in math and science. I didn't understand it. I basically failed every math test, every science test, and every regents that I ever took. And it was like, that school's out. So
I actually did well in math and science, and I still
I was
got to that
horrible.
same point, and I'm like, well, what can I do with all this? I had a degree, a bachelor's, and I'm like, well, I could go and get a master's and spend another $80,000 and get another piece of paper and be more in debt. But I think everyone's life path is different, but we definitely have a lot of connections and cross points where we can look at the more practical side of life and what we want to do with it, or just get caught up in that, kind of 9 to 5. I have to work and do my job, whether or not it's what you really want to be doing. So I was lucky enough, same thing. It was, going on 10 years ago, and I was, a case manager. I was working human services. I was working with a lot of human behavior and working with master's and doctorate level people with, behavior specialists and, people that could write behavior plans and medications, and that was all well and good, but it's still, you have that connection with the person. They found that, having that connection with the person you're working with is way more effective than any sort of reinforcers or things you can bribe or reinforce them with. And, that's where kind of the touch came in, that connection through touch, even your voice. But you found how to connect with I believe it's called the quantum energy field. And I actually just found it was a podcast where it was like physicists and leading scientists talking about quantum entanglement and quantum energy
It's
and
real.
and
It is.
quorum sensing, like how do things that can't communicate with words or the way we communicate, how do they know what to do? And flocks of birds and groups of things that work
How do
together.
dogs know how to communicate without verbalization?
Well, right. I mean,
it's fat. Well, this was probably my not understanding math and science because it seemed so random. And you talk about connection, right?
mhm.
Math and science. Now, I did not understand this as I was growing up, right? I didn't understand about these quantum connect. I always loved animals and I rode horses and I loved my dog and I was athletic and all that kind. I like nature, but I didn't understand. There was something about it that I loved, but it was something that I felt, not that I could intellectually explain or have any reason for. That would come later. But the biggest thing that I realize now is the reason why I didn't get math and science was because it was all disconnected. It was like all this random stuff. And if X over N equals Y, and I was like, but like, give me real things. You know what I mean? Like, we have an apple and an orange and a banana and a pear. Fabulous. What do you want me to do with them? Right. Or even with science, right? Because you talk about all these molecules and all this stuff, but it never made sense to me until I started understanding science through fitness training. I started understanding the science of like cardio output and, different types of like caloric intake and outtake and all that kind of stuff. But I didn't really grasp math and science till I started studying Qigong, because Qigong was this practice, super simple. I mean, the foundation of it is your breath, but you're moving your body in certain ways to clear energy channels, to
Yep.
keep your organs healthy. And I was so dedicated to my practice. Like, I didn't know that this was going to be a result of it. I just literally, like, I loved learning about traditional Chinese medicine. I loved practicing Qigong. And I didn't know why, but I just started to feel so much different and feel so much better. What I finally understood as I continued to practice was, holy cow, this practice is quantum physics. This practice brings you into the depth of silence. So we're not, the brain is still there, but we're not like activating the intellectual knowledge.
Yep.
We're actually reconnecting with the entire grid of the quantum energy field, which physicists have determined.
Right.
We live in this. It's like we're the alphabets.
Well,
and
right.
Quantum energy is the soup.
Well, it's where we came from. I mean, we all have our own philosophies about life and death and where we came from and where we're going, but we came from nothing. Then we took on our form. Like, where were we before we were born? Where are we when we sleep? Where are we when we meditate? We're still here, but we're not here. Our brain and our consciousness we're less and less aware of our form. I mean, I don't know if you've done like flotation tanks and sensory deprivation. I mean, that's
Qigong gets like that. Like you literally can have the same kind of experience holding a standing meditation,
right,
and physically be here, but not be here.
Right. I mean, you're turning off all your.
Yes.
I mean, this is all just input of what's happening out here. But if we can tune into and that's where a lot of it starts. You said the breath, then tapping into that kind of that energy, that communication, if you want to call it the universe or the ki, the chi, they're all rooted in the same thing. It's the life force energy. There's, I say you have to tap into it and be a part of that versus, I mean, when I first started doing all this stuff, I've come to find out that I was putting a lot of my own energy into it. And when you do that, you really drain yourself, and you're also taking in a lot of negative things
because at that level, it's still intellectual. Like the Oracle said in the Matrix, right? This is really going to bake your noodle. We see ourselves as these physical beings. We're able to talk, communicate, physically interact. Right. But the reality is we're trillions and trillions and trillions of oscillating molecules that come together in a lower density called the physical body.
I mean, it's the where energy turns into physical matter and vice versa. I mean, it's energy, is it?
But in this reality too, though, the thing that I realized was I always thought I was dumb in school because I kind of didn't get it. Again, we were learning these things, but I did not understand myself at that point in my life that one of the core things that really is like my gift and my genius is connection. Because I had spent so much time disconnected. I had spent so much time in my intellect. And you know how they say that humans use about 10% of their brain? Well, guess what? Here's the 10%.
Right.
And the 90% is not somewhere else out there. It's right here in your body.
And every time you stop and try to either explain it or quantify it or justify it or logic, you're already detaching from it. Because,
exactly.
So
that's why I get people literally. That's why I take people just to the space of learning how to balance their breath. Because as soon as they learn how to balance their breath, their brain actually starts to go into neutral gear. So it's not getting in the way with all the stories. And the reality is our bodies were designed for energy and raw data to come into the first brain, which is the gut brain. And then they come up to this brain to be architected. Well, we're backwards because we're trying to stuff all the raw data into the processor. The processor wasn't made to receive raw data. The gut brain, which the Chinese have identified as the first brain, is what allows us to be connected. to our world, and just like the animals.
Well,
So
that,
if we're constantly trying to think about how it goes, we're not feeling that sixth sense, which is very real. It wasn't just a crazy M. Night Shyamalan movie, but that's the space of where I learned to connect with the animals so deeply,
right,
because it's the space that they live in, and modern science isn't really yet capable
right.
of hearing, feeling, receiving, perceiving what's
Yeah,
actually taking place versus what the human intellectual mind believes is taking place and is calling it the science.
right.
It's not the real science.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's a big thing I've learned more recently is, animals and especially dogs are emotional thinkers. I mean, you're right. It's a feeling. It's a gut feeling.
I
I feel good. I feel
wouldn't
active.
necessarily call it emotion. I would call it energy. Do you know what I mean? And that energy can have a quality to it.
Right. And the energy kind of activates or affects different areas. Yeah. I mean, it's the energy, then it goes through. Then the last part is the thinking and rationalizing. And, oh, I did this because of this, or I feel this way about something because
Right.
you're higher level. And that's more people, even between people and dogs, as we tend to rationalize and make things logical, where dogs, yeah, a lot of times it's a feeling. I feel safe. This feels good. This is something I want to keep feeling. This is something I want to stop feeling. I like feeling this way with you. You're a part of this. So, and that's part of the connection. I mean, and I guess the biggest thing I struggle with is, how do you connect with dogs at a distance? How do you open up that channel with a dog you've never met, or a dog that you don't physically versus a dog that's down the street or a dog that's next door? Like, how do you know it's the right dog, and how do you pick out that dog out of every other dog in the universe?
And shiny secret. So that came as a result, honestly, of me practicing like hours and hours of Qigong. I started out slow, but I got to about, and especially being a fitness trainer, I was very, very self-disciplined. And there was something about this thing I couldn't talk to really any of my friends about it. I mean, I told them I was doing this really cool thing, and like I never had anybody practice with me. I was very private about it. I went for 3 years straight, an hour in the morning, an hour at night, never missing a practice. And I kind of started to withdraw from a lot of like my normal life stuff, because it started tuning me into the natural world. And it started tuning me into hearing information, hearing messages, hearing what the molecules that make up the quantum energy field. And this was kind of discovered. My explanation is, listen, the Tao was discovered about 5,000 years ago, and I'm sure there were civilizations before that understood. Today we call it the quantum energy field, but it
Right.
really is giving explanation to that experience, that when your brain is out of the way, you're totally connected to the entire field. Okay, so that practice led me to animal communication. Animal communication started giving me the confidence, because I had to, at first, I'd look at a picture and I'd sit and I'd get really quiet and I'd sit with it. That gave me the awareness, whoa, like we can really connect with these beings. And I know a lot of people talk, especially dog trainers, talk about body language. But if we actually really grasp the fact that these animals are totally telepathic and that they can communicate with us, the entire world of dog training would be shifted on its head. Because when you start to realize that you have a being in front of you that can actually truly communicate with you and give you sensations of what they're feeling in their body, or give you pictures or awarenesses, or you can literally, I asked them if they were going to communicate with me, it had to be in English, because if people were going to start paying me to help their animals and be precise, I had to make sure that there was nothing that I was like interpreting
Right.
right? Because there's a lot of times when we're using animal communication for life and death situations, for, animals that have been given, prognoses that they know, they're like, that's not what I have. This is what's going on. So that's where it kind of started. It was like 7 or 8 or 9 years of really building up the confidence of tuning in with these animals. And then eventually, I was able to do it without a picture. And then at a certain point, like the client would call me and immediately, like the dog would just pop in and they were already like, okay, I'm ready to go. Like, I want to talk. So I had to start trusting that. And that's really honestly and truly, it's like if you go to the gym and you build muscles, that's what I was doing. I was building muscles to know that, wow, this is actually really accurate. And it was helpful.
Right.
The second piece of that became the body alignment and recognizing that, holy cow, if bodies are out of alignment, going to affect all of the chemistry. So you could have a dog that looks really sick or is having a really challenging behavior. And the reality is they're not as sick as you think. Their energy field is clogged. And if you start to utilize a very, very simple pathway of realigning their spine, and this was physical, right? So I started it very physically, like working on animals before I'd even do anything with behavior. And I was shocked because I was like, oh my God.
Right.
This aggressive behavior is now not even aggressive. Like, where did it go?
Right. And I mean, I'm a firm believer that maybe not every last bit, but a majority of behavioral things we're seeing are, it starts in the body. It's either
100%. If you wouldn't have a behavior if you didn't have a body. So in my book, that's where you start. You start at the body level first, because while so many trainers are studying the science, and while there's so much peer-reviewed science, nobody's doing the science on how much body alignment has an effect on chemistry. I started doing that for my PhD research work because the jump kind of happened when the jump to being able to do this at a distance happened when I had so much confidence and I was seeing so much, and I wasn't trying to put it on the animal like, hey, where's your misalignment? But I just kept seeing it over and over and over. I had a client call me one day and I just said, wow, here's an interesting thing. Your dog's really out of alignment. I said, I've never done this before at a distance. I was like, I'm willing to try it. Are you willing to try it? Nothing bad is going to happen. Like the worst thing that's going to happen, nothing.
Right.
So we tried it and she calls me the next day and I'm pretty sure it was a Doberman Pinscher. And she said to me, what did you do to my dog? And I first, because oh my God, I'm not used to playing around like this.
Right.
But I was like, why? She goes, the behavior is completely different. Like it's not there. And I was like, wow. Now I had experiences of people that I worked with personally that could work on me at a distance. I just didn't have any consideration that I could even ever, do that. So then it started to become more and more, it was like, whoa, all right, we have this behavior issue, we have this health issue. I'm like, all right, cool. The animals showed me a very simple assessment tool based on Chinese medicine, based on the back alarm points. And it was cool because it lined up with all the chiropractic points. So I just started, just like I have been doing it on the bodies and seeing massive shifts where to the point where it was like, maybe I just needed to work on their body because they don't have a behavior issue.
Right.
They had
everyone could be a little looser. Everyone could be a little more, feel a little more, relaxed and less tension. And that's kind of what I, focus on is, it's the muscle tension. They have the trigger points. The trigger points they're in the same place on every single dog. You can feel them. You can feel the tension. You can feel the trigger points release. But what I find sometimes it's actually counterproductive to be touching the dog because you're touching very sensitive areas that the dog will now protect and will pull away from, and you have to ease into it.
And do you also notice that a lot of times the things that you will find, people will go, oh my God, I didn't even know. I massage my dog all the time, but I didn't find that. Like, I've never seen that in my
Yeah.
dog,
Well, a lot of people
right?
pet their dog, but I'm like,
Right.
I mean, you have to get that certain level of trust with the dog, kind of releases that surface protection layer. Then you can start probing and finding it. But I found that
But most people don't probe, you know, that like people will massage and like you said, people will pet,
yeah.
but probing, and this is not like painful probing or anything like that, but probing certain specific points.
Oh yeah, I can narrow right into it. I'm like, yep, there it is. They perk up. They're like, yep, that's the
And the
spot.
dog, you know how like humans are taught like fake it till you make it, right? That's like a
Yep.
key thing in business or whatever, confidence building. You can't, dogs can't fake it. You cannot fake when something's going on in your body. And I'm sure you'll probably notice the same thing, right? If it's a rescue, the rescue might stand there and hold their breath, like the first time you check stuff. And then
Yep.
they're like, all right, it's safe enough for me to breathe and relax. And so that you might see nothing on that first assessment. And then you go down and then you're like, oh, like, okay, here's where it is. And it's like you said, it's a very big difference between petting and massaging a dog, but not hitting on those trigger points or those back alarm points. And the coolest thing is like the dogs won't lie. Their bodies will never lie. I learned that from an incredible veterinarian who was also a cancer researcher in Colorado. He's like, the body never lies. And I knew that from fitness training, but I just was like, well, that's people. This is dogs. And when you
Right.
get into the quantum energy fields, it's like, it doesn't even matter if it's a blade of grass.
Yep.
It's all going to follow the same structure at a quantum level.
Yeah. And a lot of times I'm like, are you adding energy to the system? I'm like, your dog, if your dog is excited and having a hard time, if you start petting them and adding all this nervous, excited energy into them, because a lot of dogs will be like, nope, nope, nope. They'll start turning away and they'll be like, no, I need you to do a gentle, comforting touch. And it's usually you start on the back and then you work your way down through the back. The dog starts sitting and laying down. You get more into the chest. And now that all makes perfect sense to me. Now doing it without touching the dog. I'm trying to do it more. I'm trying to kind of visualize it.
But here's the thing. So, and this was a huge shift for me, right? Because we all learn, like, we're humans, we're in a physical body, this is what it is, you know, that sixth sense and that woo-woo stuff doesn't exist, right? But here's the thing, the woo-woo stuff, there's actually a lot of science about it. But like me, who didn't understand biology and chemistry, how in the world would somebody like me understand quantum physics? I mean, sorry, but that's for the smart people. I'm a dummy when it comes to math and science.
Well, there's the concepts and then there's the math that you need to actually prove things.
Okay. Well, and then there's a third thing. Okay. There's concepts, there's a math that you need to prove it, but then there's experience. And when you allow yourself to recognize, when we literally get out of our freaking minds, okay, that have been so conditioned to, unless it's part of the five senses, it doesn't exist. I had spent so much time in the field with the Tao and playing around in quantum science and was willing to be wrong, was willing for nothing to happen, was willing to, like, I don't know, maybe feel dumb, you know, that nothing happened. But in the innocence of trying it and going, I don't know, we got nothing to lose. Let's see if it works. Nobody's going to get hurt, right? All of a sudden, something started kicking in that was far beyond the box that I was educated in, that almost all of us are educated in. The quantum energy field exists whether you believe it or you don't. It's not a woo-woo concept like spirituality, right, which in that, you know, exists whether you believe it or not. So what started to happen was, it was actually a really good thing that I did not understand the math and the science. Because going into it in the innocence without even having a concept that I was dealing in the quantum energy field, I got to learn a whole lot about what's possible in the quantum energy field by becoming part of it. And the animals are part of it. And that's why too, like even our best laid science about dog behavior, about 10% of the equation when you're working with dogs. Now that's not to say that people aren't going to get results. They will. I'm just saying, if we're going to really talk truth about the science of dogs and the experiences that they have, we're only at about 10% of reality.
Right. Well, and that, that's kind of where I came from is, the ABA, the behavioral model that we're using is, it's great to a point, but it tends to miss the big picture.
Totally misses the big.
And,
but it is in alignment with that 10% of what we understand about science. Because like, even let's just take Western medicine, right? They only understand about 10% of the equation of actual health and healing. And when I started studying TCM and I started seeing what was happening in energies and organs and how well mapped out they had, I was like, oh, our Western medicine is basically just for emergencies. It's not really for health.
Well, if you break your arm or you're bleeding, yeah, it works great.
Exactly.
Exactly. So going back, healing, that I've actually watched the video on healer versus healer, and also your walk and sync program. And that kind of actually hit home too, because one of the first things I work on with people and their dog is how to walk together, not just walking and the dog is doing their thing and you're pulling them or you have some sort of a tool. Harnesses obviously take the stress off of the neck, and which creates a lot of frustration and tension in your relationship with your dog.
Not to mention, literally, if you, and very, very few dog trainers study this, but if you actually and have a master class on like the dog from the inside out, like what we're really dealing with and why body alignment is so important, it could lead to behavior issues. What you're talking about is the very core of what has to happen and what has to take place.
When I say, if you guys
in order for truly understanding dogs.
Yes. I mean, if you're not
truly
walking,
understanding behaviors.
Yep.
Okay, we're on a little bit of a delay.
Hey there. You're frozen.
Can you hear me?
Back. Yep, you're
Sorry.
back.
Sorry, it was on a little bit of delay. What was the last thing you heard?
The walking in sync, and that's where it all begins. And
it all because human body alignment is going to dictate breath. Dog body alignment is going to dictate breath. What you said is so true. You got to start with the foundation and basis of connection as how we're going to walk forward, not conflict.
Yep. I mean, a couple of things. I mean, my biggest thing is, one, if it's like you're a dance team and you're walking together, one of you's leading, the other gets to move around within the kind of the general framework the other's setting up. And so if you don't have that connection,
but there's that connection.
Yeah, the connection is the key. I'm like, if you can't do a two-step, you're not ready to do the tango and do the whole ballroom. You have to be able to walk back and forth and do little circles and like circle, squares, figure eights, and you're moving together, and then that energy, you're almost sharing it versus you're two different. But then the other thing is too, I mean, between the leash and a collar, or even a lot of harnesses, if they're getting pulled around, and that's where a lot of their tension is. It's on their neck, it's on their chest, it's on their shoulders, because that's where they're getting pulled from. I mean, it's like if I grab you by the ear or your shirt collar and try to walk around with you, yeah, you'll walk with me, but how do you feel about me? As opposed to we just walk together or we hold hands, something like that.
Well, and that one of the things that was revealed to me as the dogs, I've never studied dog training. I've never, I mean, I read a couple of books by C.W. Meisterfeld, who was the first positive reinforcement gun dog trainer that was out in California. Because of the animal communication piece, I have always been listening to the dogs. So they've been training me, they've been telling me, they've been educating me about what their truth is.
Right.
So when I started working on bodies, they said, you realize this is not the collection point for a dog. This is, they said, imagine if you put your finger on somebody right here and you told them, okay, pull up your energy, see how you can, like, you it literally, you if you're here, you can push against muscles. There's no muscle here. So what happens is you have to go back to your brain. And all of a sudden, like, the thing that you would do instinct wise, now you actually have to think about, wait a second, why am I not moving forward? And dogs love to pull away from things. They hate to push into things, not what they were designed to do.
Right.
So when I'd been meditating and I saw the vision or the harness, then I saw the instructions that they gave me for the leash was to have two, flat handles that were at a specific space, because then you can keep consistency. So as soon as the dog felt a light pressure on the chest and the person stopped, now this is where the physics comes in, which is actually really kind of cool, because I never would have figured. I was like, I don't know about these things. So this was the quantum energy field continuing to teach me, right, through the animals. But all of a sudden, when I developed it and we started using it, I was like, holy cow, because I can see energy. So I saw that as soon as the dog started to pull, the human not being able to be pulled and not getting leash burn, they all of a sudden took a deep breath, like, oh my God, I got my dog and he can't pull me. And the second thing that happened was, as soon as the human's breathing and physiology relaxed, and the dog realized, I'm so used to pulling and being out there, but like they're not moving. So now I actually have to check in with my human to be like, what's going on? In an instant, the dog took a deep breath, backed up and relaxed. The human almost immediately, their entire energy field was now filled with a greater level of confidence. The dog was like, oh my God, I feel like I heard you for the first time, that you actually wanted me to stop pulling. Because when you're here, right, what's going to happen? You're going to choke yourself. And people wonder, why does my dog keep choking myself? I'm like, one, because you're at the wrong collection point. This is the collection point for a dog. It's not their throat. It's not behind them. It's right here. And if you catch it at just the right amount of distance, and the human actually just relaxes, the dog will literally start to shift their behavior almost immediately. That's why, we often get results with Walk and Sync where people let us know, like, I've tried everything, nothing's worked. And I'm like, but nothing else was actually based on the quantum physics energy field.
I mean, you can do it. You can do it with a leash and a flat collar, but it's a little harder because, once you get that pulling and leaning into the throat,
Well, but here's the thing. Once you understand the anatomy and physiology inside the body, you won't ever use a flat collar again for training a dog, because there's too much risk involved. And it's risk that we don't see. That's why I developed my missing link masterclass, because I teach about the body from the inside, starting from the energy field, and then the bones, and then the nerves that go through the bones, and then the tendons and ligaments, and then how they connect with the organs, and then how that whole structure works from a Chinese medicine perspective, and what the actual structures are made of. And really, it's not about an ego thing. Like, I don't care. You want to walk your dog on a collar, you want to train that way, that's fine. But if we're going to talk science, what I landed up putting together in that masterclass, and I'm happy to share that with your audience, no charge, I can send you a link. But when you watch it and when you understand what's actually taking place under the surface, and then how the fascia wraps around all of it and can kind of get dented, or can kind of pull bones off a place, which can affect blood flow and can affect organs, and then understanding how those things actually from the inside of the body really are oftentimes at the root of behavior issues. It, like I said, it flips the whole model, because everything we do is about looking at behaviors, thinking that the behavior is the real issue. And as trainers, right, most people are taught, you got to fix that behavior. You got to get into that dog's head. And what I'm saying is, au contraire, mon frere, I've seen enough after, hands-on working on over 700 dogs and working on several hundred dogs at a distance. That's actually not the true science. The true science actually starts in the body, because the thing is, positive dog training. I mean, I was training my dog like 30 years ago, and there was no positive dog training. There was a choke chain, there was nose halters, there were prong collars, right? And there were shock collars, and there were harnesses, but they were back clip harnesses.
Yep.
Everything I did hurt my dog. Just everything, like how to go to the chiropractor, how to go to the acupuncturist. But the whole philosophy back then was, you do not ever give that dog food, or you will basically be struck down by lightning. Right? So it was like that scary, like, I can't do anything else. Back then, I met a woman who was probably one of the first, people that was starting to do positive dog training. So she had a treat bag. Well, imagine my surprise when my chocolate lab, who didn't listen to me for anything, really dragged me around the neighborhood, all of a sudden had bionic hearing.
Oh, yeah.
And it was great till it didn't work anymore. Right? And that has constantly been my path of like, well, what do you do when it doesn't work? And everybody keeps going, well, you get a higher value treat. What I learned from the dogs is, in the natural world, they don't use treats. So how do they get their young? How do they train their young? And that's when I started diving into it. And I, 11 years ago, I was brought together with my wolf dog. And I asked, because my basset hound was only 1.5 and she was dying from a very rare disease, and we couldn't save her. So the night before she left, I whispered in her ear, would you come back as a wolf, a white wolf with blue eyes? And would you please teach me the authentic language, not the body language,
Right.
but the actual authentic language of how you guys do this? And it's been a fascinating journey. So that's actually how I learned dog training. I learned it from a previous wolf dog that was in my life that I lived with for a while. Then I learned it from my dachshund. And then I learned it from my wolf dog. So everything that I do, it has a completely connected component to it. I sadly, and most trainers would probably make fun of me, I don't understand the trainer language. I don't understand, environmental this, counter conditioning, clockwise counter conditioning, like all of those terms that everybody learns. I don't understand that. I understand animals, and I understand that humans are animals too. So I understand breath, and I understand bodies, and they have shown me how much body alignment affects behaviors, and how our energy side of us, like you said, right, with people like, amping up their dogs and not realizing it.
Yeah,
Well,
because I know the breath. You talk a lot about the breath, and you worked with some wild Mustangs, and so did you just research with just the breathing around them? You talk more about
no,
that?
so, well, what happened there was I had been doing long distance work, and about February of 2020, I went out to visit a wild Mustang sanctuary that was, I didn't even know, it was like 1.5 hours from me. And when I went out there, I had met Mustangs before, but I had never really been in an area where like you could go in and you had Mustangs all around you. That was like, wow. So that was a whole introduction to and I've had a horse for 20 years. So he's been conditioning me and educating me on so many things having to do with the subtle energies that take place that are beyond what you can even see. Like I always say, if you're looking at body language, you're already too late. because when you feel it, you can already feel right when the dog's right, when that tail goes straight or when that lift, you can feel it beforehand.
Right. And most people wait till they do it so they can say no or correct it. I'm like, well, if you know it's about to happen,
why aren't you doing something beforehand, right?
Yeah,
why are you nipping it in the bud?
I'm like, right before you say no is your last chance to say yes or to help them.
Yes.
Or, yes. It's
exactly. Well, I didn't plan on doing the PhD. I did not plan on, I didn't even know till I went out, worked, whoever wanted energy work or body work. I did body work and it was really astounding. It's like they just started to line up, and I'm like, wow. And it was my first awareness, like, wait a second, because of the quantum energy field, like if I'm working on one, well, anybody around them in that field is also getting work done.
Yeah.
That was shocking.
Or they're drawn to you. I get, if I start touching one, I get 5 more,
Right. And here's the cool thing. Now you asked me about like, how do you do this at a distance? Well, start doing it by working on one that's in your vicinity and start recognizing, like when you're working on that one, notice what's happening in everybody else. Maybe even set up a camera, right? So you can focus on the one, but you can see, because you will see the others. They'll take a deep breath, they'll stretch, right? So it's a weird concept because we constantly think, no, we can only do this. And
well, so it used to be funny because it would be like I would walk into a room, it would be my dog that I see every day, my daughter's dog that I see on weekends, and then usually 1 or 2 other dogs that I've been working with, maybe just that day or for a little while. And my dog would go down and relax the fastest. Then it would be the next one. Then the next one would be, he would get this kind of funny look on his face. Then they would sit and then lay down. They weren't quite sure why.
Yes.
And then it would just go right down the chain. And I think that's just based on, your connection with them and how much they've done it in the past. It's the
connection with them, but it really is like, that's exactly what quantum entanglements is. It's the cells start vibrating and resonating together. Like, how they say, like, if you have a cuckoo clock shop, like at a certain time, they're all going to be resonating with each other, right? That's literally what you experience is the quantum energy field. I always thought it was like, nope, it can only be this one-on-one thing. But the animals constantly show me. And then like I'd be working on a dog and then all of a sudden they're humans like, God, I feel so much more relaxed. I never touched the human. I wasn't even working on the human. But when I was with these Mustangs, one of the Mustangs, my friend who runs the sanctuary, he was scratching him on his chest and he said, yeah, the problem with him is he's been here 1.5 years. I can't really get down his back. This is as far as he lets me go. I didn't really think about it because there were like 6 other things around me. And I was, you think Mustangs, you're like, whoa, they move quick and I got to be really aware. Well, he walked away. I landed up working on him and releasing what was tight in his back. And he came back. And then all of a sudden, my friend is kind of like, well, now I'm scratching him on his shoulders. And now I'm scratching him on his back. And I'm not understanding at the moment, why is he kind of like yelling this at me? But what happened because his body got back into alignment was his behavior changed so fast. And he released what he needed to release, which was not just misalignment, but was also emotional trauma from being gathered and separated from his family and injured. And that I couldn't take it all in at the moment that it was happening because there was so much going on and it was such a new experience for me to be in this energy field of like all Mustangs, where your head wants to be on high alert, but your body's like, hey, dude, chill out, relax. Like, it's okay. And when I was driving home over a mountain pass and then through the valley that I had to drive through the canyons, I pulled over And the next thing I heard from those horses was, "This is your PhD." And I was like, "Excuse me?" They were like, "Yeah, you're going to do film on Zoom case studies at a distance." And we did distances of 100 to like 1,500 miles away. Horses I never met, never touched. They just kind of popped up on the screen and I saw them. And I had no judgment. Like, I didn't know what was wrong. I heard their background a little bit, but I did the same exact process on every single horse. We had horses that immediately dropped to the floor on certain parts where I touched their back and just completely were like out cold. And then, came back, shook off, and were like, "What just happened?" We had horses that were moving around that as soon as I started the alignment process, they just stood there for like 30 minutes. I mean, it was astounding because it's not like I could say, "Hey, I've done this this was the beginning of me really realizing what the expertise was and really trusting the fact, like, wow, we can work through the energy field, through
Right.
quantum.
Now
But we
what
got to get this out of the way.
my biggest thing is, what I say is, if I can't touch the dog, those are the hardest ones for me. And do you find
But I
that
would say
there's
the block
well,
to that
right,
is here.
right.
Because you were conditioned.
Well,
That's
I'm conditioned to want to try to touch them, and that alone gets them to be a little hesitant or resistant. So that was my question, though: is do you find any animals that are resistant or not allowing you
yes,
to connect and help them?
yes.
Okay.
One of my clients whose horses I work with every month past year, one of her horses I know his ribs are out and I know he's a little bit off and he's just been a little like, I don't know, a little more guarded. I mean, sometimes they're like, "I am not getting worked on right now. There's something bigger that I'm trying to show this human." This was the other thing that came out of all this body work and the animal communication, and then understanding the energy that we exhibit and emit in our animals, and then soul contracts of what animals take on to also help their humans understand about themselves by sometimes reflecting back certain behaviors, right? Because humans like to keep going out. They don't really like to sit still and go within and heal what needs to be healed. So I was just a couple of days ago, my client connected with me and she's like, "Look, he's got to go to the farrier's coming." He wouldn't connect with me at all. He was like, "I'm not talking about this right now." And I'm like, "Okay." And the farrier did come yesterday and he did fantastic. But yeah, there's absolutely times like, sometimes I won't, if I have animals to work on, my clients are fine. Like, I'll work on them when I have the time to work on them. I just wait till the energy aligns, like till they're ready, until they basically give me their permission that it's okay.
Well, that's kind of one of our new things is that you want to kind of change it up. So like if you're sitting, stand up or walk to the other side of the room. What I found is walking around the dog helps kind of break up and kind of get the energy moving. I mean, I've had dogs where
I'm not around them. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
well,
I have
yeah.
clients that are like overseas in Australia,
Oh, yeah.
in England, in Egypt. So I don't have, the luxury of that physical presence. I think that through my Qigong practice, I don't know, I just let everything go and I just drop into a totally empty space and I just listen, and it's from that listening that they either, will verbally communicate or body-wise communicate what is taking place. And one of the other fascinating things I found, because you mentioned on it at the beginning of our talk about emotions, I always thought that the body alignment was the body alignment, and then the animal communication about the emotional piece would be like two different things. What I started finding when I worked on the Mustangs, because look, wild Mustangs aren't around a lot of people, right? They don't really understand English. They get gathered and then they're learning about us. But one of the things that they showed me was within some of those misalignments, are the emotional component
Yeah.
trapped in the physical, like what happened.
It's the emotional
So,
baggage. Yeah. It gets
yeah,
stored in the muscles. Yep.
but then but then it became like, oh, this is not this separate process. This is just this unified process that as they're getting rebalanced, they're releasing this old emotional stuff.
I mean,
So
I've seen rage. I've seen you start rubbing and they will get, you can see it. They get
yes,
enraged. They want to attack your hand, but it's like, it feels good because you're helping them. So
yes,
finding that kind of that delicate, that balance where you're
yes,
addressing it, but you're not aggravating it. You're drawing attention
exactly.
to it. I mean, that was what I learned with the trigger points is you have to touch it just enough where it recognizes and it feels it, but it doesn't feel the need to protect. And then, taking a deep breath helps. Trying to get a dog to take a deep breath is not as easy as it sounds. You can apparently do it,
Well, a lot of the
but
times too, some of the reason why it's hard, think about dogs, right? As puppies, running around, banging into things, banging into each other, they trip over stuff. And us humans too. When we experience a trauma, whether it's physical, emotional, psychological, the first thing that happens is we're kind of like,
yep,
and our diaphragm pulls up.
and it
Now,
protects. Yep.
totally protects, right? So what happens is people will do training for certain behavior that will override the dog's need to actually just figure out and get help with dropping their diaphragm and being able to finally take a big deep breath again and feel safe in their body. This is my issue with why we need to go to bodies first, because when you allow energy to get stuck in the body, okay, and energy can get trapped, emotional energy can get trapped. We all know people that have had emotional issues that kind of turned into cancer. We know people that have had injuries and accidents and had traumas, and at those trauma sites, cancers have developed because the breath stopped going there. So this is why I'm so huge on, we have to have this in our toolboxes. Animal parents and also animal trainers, we have to understand that we should be going to the body first, because that's the first place that's going to be stuck, that's going to create the chemistry, which is creating the behavior. And if we really want to be of the highest service to these animals, not just in our egos about how great we are as trainers, then we go to the body first. We make sure that there's no unrecognized pain or discomfort. Make sure that the animal is breathing properly. We let them reorganize their body first. And then we evaluate and go, okay, what behavior am I seeing now? Instead, what we do is we go to assess the behavior, we're overriding the behavior, and it takes weeks and weeks and weeks to retrain it. And I'm like, if you would just go to the body first, you get rid of all of that pent up excessive energy. The animal could actually relax in their body. That's where they should be naturally and instinctively doing their behaviors from.
Right. Well, and a lot of what I focus on too is when the dog is feeling uncomfortable or needs your help and they come to us, most people deny the dog or ignore the dog. I'm like, no, they need your help. I'm like, if you can help them feel better, they'll stop coming to you as much. They will be more secure in themselves. They will be more confident and resilient. They will shake it off instead of always having to come to you to help them feel better.
But isn't that wonderful? Like what the possibilities of animal communication actually opens up in dog training?
Yeah.
Because instead of doing what some other human taught you to do, because they got some results,
Right.
what if you actually responded and showed up? Like you said, the way the dog needs you to show up, actually hearing them about what's truly going on. And that takes being able to be quiet and listen, to get out of your intellectual brain with all your science.
Right.
But here's the thing about science, it doesn't feel, it thinks.
Well, they took the feeling out of dog training and behavior ceremoniously many years ago because we didn't need to worry about that. It was there. That was part of it. They took it out. So no, we don't need to worry about that. And even today, like they will put bits and pieces back or
Right.
make sure your dog feels safe or tend to their emotional needs. But the more I
But all
learn about,
separated, right? Like
well,
you
and
said, they'll put in pieces, but they do not, and they have not developed, like both of us have learned body work, right? Well, body work, then there's animal communication work, and then there's leadership energy work about what that is.
right.
All of those things are separated out. I put together a really comprehensive picture.
All right. And I purposely
All of
didn't read that yet because I wanted to talk to you and do this
it's
first.
coming. It's coming. Like I've been figuring out how to write the book. Like I have a course on body alignment that people can learn right from the comfort of
Yeah, and
their home.
it's not
have a
just
course on-
special people that can do it. It's
No,
pretty much
anybody.
anyone. Yep.
Anybody. Like if you have hands that work, and even if they don't work, I will teach you so simply in about 7 hours over the course of a couple of videos how to pass and release the tension in your animal's back. Because quite honestly, and I'm sure you see this all the time in terms of behaviors,
That's the first thing I do.
Right? It's become my 90%
I
tool.
put my hand on them. I probe
Right?
around. Even the
Yes.
daycare dogs. I mean, if you
Yes.
they're starting to get wound up and they're running and getting crazy, help them bring them down a couple notches. Release it. They'll lay down. They'll play more relaxed versus that crazy. I mean, because what I say is if the muscles are tight and tense, they're turned on and they need to be active. They want to
Which
be
means the
using.
brain for a dog, they don't have any other outlet
Right.
than to be active.
And even if you turn it off, they want to turn back on because that's what it's used to and it's been turned on. So that's my next question is, you do the alignments and you see a change in the dog. I tend to see the dog regress back very quickly, depending on how much tension there was. If the dog is young and supple, I can get it out and they usually do pretty well versus an older dog with a lot of tension built up. I can release, I can get them loose, and literally within like a day, they'll be.
So it depends on where you're working from. What I landed up finding was when I was working the muscles, I found that when I was working the trigger point of the muscles, that they somehow showed me and brought me into the whole fascia system. And they were like, look, you can release the muscle, but fascia is like saran wrap around the entire body before like the skin layer, right?
Right.
Before the skin gets applied in the fur. So when they brought me into it and they showed me, look, you got to be working at the fascia level, because if you release the fascia is what's going to release the entirety of the muscle tension. If you're just working on the muscle, the fascia still has an imprint, it still has an intelligence, and then it keeps feeding back to that muscle, hey, you're still not complete. But as soon as the fascia, and this was freaking fascinating, because I was like, here I think that the body, like, okay, we talk about blood, we talk about bones, plasma, all this stuff. But when you start realizing at a molecular, cellular level that all of these molecules and cells have this vast friggin' intelligence, that the quantum energy field is running in what we are existing in and is allowing our bodies to process, and it's not this, right? This is just that processor. That blew me away. Because when I started doing the work with the fascia as well as releasing like the bone tension, when I started releasing the fascia tension on the bones, then everything changed. And it was like, holy cow. I mean, I'm thinking like you, right? It's like, okay, well, we did the muscles and like a massage. Now we're going to have to do it in a couple of days. When I started working at the fascia level, it changed everything because they were holding their alignments 3 weeks, a month, a couple of months, and then something else would come up. So that's really the level that I was shown by the quantum energy field to start working at. And that it's just made such an extraordinary difference in terms of how long it lasts.
And that's what you kept saying, like when I first talked to you, like, yeah, you don't need to do all that. Nope, you don't need to do all that. There's an easier way. So, and that, not to cut through everything, but if there's an easier way,
Yeah. But that's what happens. It's like for me, like I studied anatomy and physiology, right? I went to all of the books. I knew like where everything was. And the more and more and more, interestingly and oddly, that I kept going into the quantum energy field, it was like, holy cow, there's like a master reset, you know? And I'm not saying it covers everything, but it covers a good 90 to 95%. And what started happening was I started forgetting like the names of certain things. I started forget, where I thought this is so important. I like in order to be factual, right? Like I have to remember all this. And then what kind of started happening, it was like, ease up, man. It's just energy. And I was like,
Well, and
what?
they're big fancy words for things, like I took anatomy, I took physiology. They're just big fancy words for structures and things. And
But they don't actually, like you can know all of those things, right? But when you literally keep diving more and more and more into that energy field, it's like humans name those things. God doesn't care, or the God particle or the quantum energy field.
right.
It doesn't care what you name it. It just cares, are you touching it in the right place and are you releasing the right thing? And that's kind of all you need to know.
Right. And actually, when I started having a lot of breakthroughs was when I had a light that was on a motion sensor, and it would always turn off when I was on the floor doing the body work because you have to be high. So I'd have to wave my hand to turn it back on. So at a certain point, I just left the light off and I went by feel. And that's where I got a lot of progress because you're not thinking about it. You're just doing it. And you can almost trace the tension back to right where it starts, find that spot, work through it. And,
and it's not that big of a deal. Like my
if you're doing it right,
doctor,
it's not hard. If you're doing it right, it works. If you're trying too hard, it probably isn't.
Exactly. And like you said at the beginning, right? Like when you're trying to push energy, didn't really work. My Chinese doctor said a couple things. One of the things he said was, I teach you a technique, not so that you stay stuck in the technique, but so that you transcend it. And I didn't understand when he first said it, but what he was really meaning was transcend the technique and enter the Tao.
Yeah.
Use the technique to train your energy, right? Like I teach people in my classes very methodical, technical ways to do the work that they're doing. But then I encourage them, do it to the point where you could do this with your eyes closed, blindfolded, and one hand behind your back, because you're so used to feeling.
Well, it goes both ways. I mean, your brain and your hands will do the right thing if you're listening to the other body and it's telling you what to do.
Exactly.
And that's the thing is, if it happens very quickly, if you're doing it right. And the dog will let you know you're doing it right because they will respond.
And how many people too, like when you think about trainers, how many trainers actually listen to the dog before they're observing behavior, labeling the dog, coming up with their protocol, and not even really listening to the dog? And again, they get results. So I'm not knocking results, but it's that 10% of, hey, I fixed the behavior, to, yeah, but did you really address what was at the root cause for the dog?
Right. I mean, did you get the dog to do it, or did you convince the dog it wanted to do it?
Exactly.
I mean, you can get a
And
dog.
I'm all about, I am 100% about, I don't care if people ridicule me. I don't care if people speak badly about me. I don't care if people want to troll me or put me down. My job here, since I started as an animal communicator, I will always tell the truth. That's the animal's truth. I am not interested in the human's truth very much.
Right. Well, and a lot of humans are like, well, we don't want the dog to do this. I'm like, well, he's doing that because you're not meeting their needs. And they're going to meet their needs one way or the other. So we can suppress it, or we can try to teach you how to meet the need. But
isn't that it though? Like too, right? When you say connection, isn't it that it's not just about the dog? And when a pack, mommies have babies, there's a whole 360-degree energy that takes place. And most of dog training is a one-lane. Some people are starting to open up to a 2-lane highway. You know what I mean? At best. But if we don't understand the 360-degree nature how animals literally communicate with each other, how they train their young, how they listen, how they hear, how they contact and connect with each other telepathically. Till we get past that and recognize that training is never just about the dog. There is always the human side of the leash too that has to be trained.
Yeah, I
Then
mean
in my opinion,
the dogs are easy. It's their owners that take
totally, yeah. But if we still stay with the science of the dog, and again, we don't understand that it's a 360-degree equation. You have to help people understand the energy that they have to have in their body, because their energy, even though they think they're doing it right, could be the reason why their dog is insecure, could be the
Right.
reason why their dog is boundaries. So I see all of this, and I love what you said, and I'll bring it 100% 360 to, it's all about connection, but it's having to move beyond the connection of our 5 senses into our 6th sense. And that's going to open up that other 90% that's like, wow, this is a really complete picture. Right. This is a really holistic approach to helping humans and animals understand each other, behave well on both sides of the leash, right? And address the root of problems. So not only are the dog's behaviors, becoming impeccable, so are the humans.
Right. Can you excuse me for 1 second? All right, I'm back.
Okay. So I think we could go on for a long time. I think this is one of several conversations.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, what I'm thinking is I actually go through your information, and I purposely didn't go through any of it other than, your YouTube videos and to get that general idea. But I definitely like everything I'm hearing, and it's very, very interesting to me. I could definitely see where a lot of people are like, yeah, whatever. But I mean, now that I'm getting to this point where it's like, I see it all, and, I wrote this down. It's like, you're actually confirming everything I know to be true through science versus everything I think to be true through experience. And, putting that all together and just having, that kind of, there is something further down the road. It's not just about, training. It's about connection, relationship, healing. And the fact that
training is only, we make training so much of the equation, but quite honestly, it baffles me, because training is about 10% of the equation. The 90% is the relationship and the connection.
When the training happens, like, I don't need to tell a dog to sit.
Exactly.
It sits because it wants to, because it's comfortable.
Exactly.
I don't have to tell a dog to stay because it lays down and gets comfortable, because it can, because its muscles are relaxed enough and it can turn off and be comfortable doing nothing.
And you're creating the proper energetic environment. And this is why I say, dogs don't read science papers, right? They read energy. And so all of these trainers out there that are poo-pooing energy, I'm like, what in the world do you people think you exist in?
Well, right. I mean, I've
energy. Like, we're the alphabets and the energy is the soup. So if we don't understand that, in my opinion, we're not doing the best service for dogs. There's several missing links in here, and there's so much arrogance, because I'm just going to reverse one thing that you said. You said you feel the science and think the experience. I'm just going to reverse it. You think the science, but you actually feel the experience. And for so many of us, we won't trust our own dang experience.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, what I was getting at is, is we've had certain things that are confirmed by science, but there's things that we believe to be true, but it's not confirmed by science, because it's almost impossible to prove it. But
it's not impossible to prove it. The thing is, that's what I've honestly been doing for the last 15 years, is I've been proving it. I've been proving the telepathic piece of training. I've been proving the body training. I've been proving the distance piece and the energy. Like, as soon as you shift something, you get an immediate behavior shift in that dog. Now, you can deny it all you want, but that's been the proving over and over and over.
Right.
It's so much easier than we make it.
Right. But doing that in a lab to the satisfaction of a panel of,
But
academics.
here's my issue with lab-based science. Not all of it, but some of it, right? If you're going to tell me that something is scientific, truly based in science, the science of Mother Nature, the science of the environment, then that thing should actually be applicable to all life forms in any situation, under any condition. No, like, let's eliminate this and let's eliminate that. And it should be able to work under any condition at any time, with any animal of any age, with any temperament, with any behavior issue, any breed. Okay.
Right.
That's my version of science. I don't really buy into, well, we proved it in a lab. Great. But guess what? A lab is not a natural environment. So therefore, you're telling me that it's man-made science. It's not actually based on the science of the truth of nature. Now, I'm much more interested in the science of the truth of nature, because I kind of think after like a couple billion years, she just knows a little bit better than us, right?
Well, it's connecting with a dolphin or a Mustang out in nature versus in a tank.
Right.
You can train them because you're giving them their dinner and they have to work for their dinner.
Oh, and I observed that when I was on my honeymoon years ago. I was in a place in Mexico called Escaret. And I mean, even though the pen was structured so that it was like, oh, the dolphins can go out at night and they come back. My hiney.
Right.
There was a new dolphin there that they had captured from the wild, and they were trying to fish train it. I will never in my entire life till the day I leave this planet ever forget the screams of that animal, because it was separated, it was confused, it didn't understand. And it was the first time I was like, wow, all these things that these trainers tell us that are from the, aquatics world, the cetacean world, I don't believe any of them anymore, because I saw what happened and the torment that an animal had to go through to become part of our world. And I was like, yeah, it's not for me.
That's the article I posted, though. It's Skinner. He basically put his kid in a box and raised her, and she was fine, and she didn't have any emotional needs.
But see the difference? But right there, you just hit that nail on the head. Science does not include feeling. And when you cut off that feeling, and when you're abusing these innocent animals over and over and over to prove your science, you become a monster, in my opinion, not a scientist. Because if you cannot feel that you having to torture a being, instead of simply being able to kind of telepathically communicate with it and learn from it, then you have lost your perspective of what it is to be a human being.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. I watched the one with the bobcat or whatever that was protecting her baby and kept pushing that guy, the jogger, away. It's one of your videos where the bobcat the guy was running and the cat was chasing him away from her cub.
Oh yeah, like he kept threatening, and I'm like, if you would just say, hey, I get it, you got babies, I'm backing out of here. Yep. I'm just going to go. I'm sorry I interrupted your space. But he kept doing what humans say to do. Get bigger, get bigger, get bigger. Yeah. Well, everything that I've learned from telepathic communication, and I've been around a lot of wild animals, and I've had a lot of unexpected wild animals experiences living in the woods or the forests of Colorado. You get calm and you get quiet and you get respectful. Okay. You go into fear. See, the biggest problem is we go into fear. Right. We go into fear because of everything we've been taught about these animals. But when you actually understand who they are, and they could care less about you unless you're a pet.
Right.
And you just respect the laws of nature, and you allow yourself to humble yourself to what Mother Nature teaches, there would rarely be any human animal interactions. I mean, people are terrified of wolves. Wolves are some of the kindest, most loyal, most honest beings I have ever met in my life. And people are afraid of them. But if you look at how many people have ever been killed from wolves in the United States? I think it's 3. How many wolves have been killed?
Right.
Millions and millions. And all because of fear, which turns to hatred.
Right.
If there was actual understanding, and if we remembered that telepathy is truly a part of our being, just like, feeling, right? Energy, we could change this entire world so quickly, because we would never activate our defensiveness, and we would release the notion of control, and we would remember, even though we think we're the most intelligent species, the creator loves every grain of sand as much as every elephant, dog, cat, human. And if we could get out of that arrogance by recognizing that we are truly part of the entire system, literally, we could heal our whole planet within a couple of weeks. So to me, when people look at me and say, well, where is your science? I'm like, I live and breathe my science every single day. And I watch it every single day work. And when it doesn't work, it's because I wasn't listening, and I ask the animals, how did I step out of line here? And they tell me, and I get right back into alignment. So you talked about at the beginning with the connection. The truth is, we need to also be completely connected with ourselves to be working with these animals. And I think that is a huge component. And when people, poo-poo leadership and we've proven it doesn't work and blah, 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 I'm going to call bullshit. It really does work, because
Right.
the peace and harmony that we have inside of us is what the peace and harmony of nature is. And I think dogs took a vow of silence because they realized how silly and arrogant we humans would become. And they were like, I swear to love them unconditionally.
Right.
Till they get it.
Well, that's a big thing, like the, indigenous native people that were connected with the earth and the animals, and they had that connection, and then we lost it and took it away from them and exploited it and
went up into our intellects.
Yep.
And now look at what's happening on our planet as a result of our intellects. 1 in 2 dogs have cancer. We're killing off all the wolves. We're killing off all the keystone species because we think we're so smart. And what's happening on the planet? When the animals ran the planet and the indigenous peoples populated it, the animals taught the indigenous peoples how to live on this planet. The planet was vibrant and abundant and exquisite from feeling. Now that we have all this thinking, look at everything we have been destroying.
Yep.
That's my exact point of why we should hang out with animals more, understand telepathic communication, body alignment, like natural energy, and stop trying to control everything.
Is there one message you would like to share with the audience about how to best support your beloved furry family members?
Yes. The one is, seriously, just learn how to breathe properly. Because if you can breathe properly and be comfortable in your body, literally it will start opening up all these awarenesses and wanting to know and understand all of these connections and how to really up level.
That's my number one suggestion to dog owners is take a deep breath.
Yes.
That
And I
doesn't
do
work.
have a breathing CD which teaches like a proper balanced breath. So
and there's what's his name, Paul Owens, the dog whisperer, that's in the book. Take a deep breath. It changes your physiology.
Taking a deep breath isn't always the same as a chi breath, because most people, the same place they get stuck is the same place they'll breathe. So they'll go it feels so much better, but I'm like, no, we got to get that breathing into your belly and move in your whole system.
Well, once I hear the dog start sighing and releasing that, then you're
exactly. But then the brain can really come back online.
They usually let down.
That about the diaphragm, right?
Yep.
When that gets stuck and you are not taking a full deep breath, you're constantly in sympathetic.
Yep.
Well, if you're constantly in sympathetic, there's going to be so much pent up energy. That's where you see so many of these behavior issues happen. That's why I always suggest learn about your dog's body. It will be so educational for you. Make sure your trainer knows truly about your dog's body from the inside out. Because when you know these things, you can be the best advocate for your dog. And if a trainer's telling you something and you're like, yeah, I learned the actual real science of anatomy and physiology, which has been around for many, many more years than the 30 years of positive dog training, then that starts making a huge shift and ripple in this industry that I think, like I said, I think it's a huge missing link. And a lot of people will get pissed off. A lot of people will try to discredit, the work that I've done over the last 25 years. But I laugh and I say, well, let's prove it. Let's just do it. And you see the changes all the time. That's the science.
Is there a number one message that our animals would like to share with us?
Yes, love yourself unconditionally. Heal thyself, human. I will help you unconditionally. Love yourself.
Yep, animals
really,
definitely help us and help us learn about ourselves and how to be better people. And if you listen. All right, well, this is a really good talk. I'm going to have all your information. We got AlleciaMaine.com, Animal Healer, HEELER.com, walkandsync.com. We'll have the links to all that. Holistic approach to dogs, the truth of dogs directly from the dogs. Couldn't have said it better myself. They tell us how to help them if we listen. Meeting their needs, getting what they want, and they help us become better people, and we can live happier, healthier lives together.
Exactly. And that's really the point, right? Like bringing back the sacred balance of why we're in connection with each other.
Yep, definitely. All right, Allecia, I really appreciate it. I look forward to talking with you again.
Same
and
here.
See ya. Thanks again.
Thank you.